Welcome back to the fourth episode of the Drive to Dayton podcast. I'm your host, Michael Roth, alongside TJ Petros. TJ, it's a new year. We've moved into 2025 high school basketball season, about a month underway, and we will recap everything we saw in December. Look forward to January and beyond. Going to be a busy month, a lot of long days spent in the gym, and we had a lot of holiday basketball to break down as well over the Christmas break. Are you ready to get going?
I'm ready, brother.
All right. Well, we are going to start the show taking a look back at our preseason state championship predictions in all seven divisions and basically doing a temperature check. Well, what do you think about each team that you picked? We'll start in Division One. I went with Olentangy Orange. And, I'm feeling solid about this one. They haven't lost to a team in Ohio. They still play an excellent brand of basketball. They've had a tough schedule that's preparing them well for the playoffs. There's plenty of other teams that could win Division One. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. But I think if you're making me pick anybody right now, there'd be no reason for me to change off of Olentangy Orange.
I'd have to agree. That was my pick as well, and I'm going to stick to my guns. Olentangy Orange 7-1, like you mentioned. The only loss they have is to Indianapolis Cathedral, who we know is one of the better teams in the state of Indiana. But they've also got some pretty big wins so far. I mean, they got Westerville North, Dublin Kaufman, Upper Arlington, and Centerville this past weekend. I think a really good game this coming Sunday, which we'll break down a little bit later, though. They take on St. Ignatius at the Cleveland Play-by-Play Classic. So that'll be a good one between two of the probably top five teams in Division One. I think it'll be a good test for both squads.
Absolutely. Really excited for that game and another handful of games at the Cleveland Play-by-Play, a loaded slate once again. In Division Two, I went with Lima Senior. I'm feeling okay about this one. It seems like Westerville North has probably been the most impressive team in Division Two to start the season, but Lima Senior isn't far off. They've got a ton of depth, ton of athleticism, and I haven't seen them in person yet this year. I will see them at Flying to the Hoop in the middle of January, so that'll be a nice first in-person watch of Lima Senior. They just picked up a solid victory over Toledo Central Catholic by double digits. Their only losses on the road to Division One powerhouse Toledo Whitmer. So I still feel pretty good about Lima Senior, even though I think if you're making power rankings at the moment, Westerville North would be number one.
Yeah, and that's who I went with was Westerville North, but I don't think there's a wrong answer here. One thing that I firmly believe is come postseason time, man, games are won with guards. I think both teams are absolutely loaded with depth at that position. Westerville North, though, right now, 6-2. They beat Richmond Heights, Delaware Hayes, Pick Central, and Louisville. We were, I think we were on hand for two of those games. I thought the win over Louisville was really impressive. Louisville, a team that's not normally rattled by pressure, and athleticism. I thought Westerville North really bothered them, didn't allow them to get comfortable, get into the flow of their offense. So that was a really big game, in my opinion, for Westerville North. Kind of showed me that they're turning the corner a little bit. Their only losses have been to Olentangy Orange, who we just talked about, and St. Ignatius. So two quality losses. I don't think you can be upset at either one of those if you're Coach Trusley. But yeah, I'm going to stick with Westerville North. I'm pretty confident here. Uh, Obviously, we know Ty Perkins, Akron commit, has been stellar. But shout out to Micah Young, kid going to Concord. I think has been having a phenomenal season so far. His performance against Louisville was perhaps probably the best game I've ever seen him put together on both sides of the ball. So I think with him, and then you have the younger Perkins, you have Tony Cornett. You have Nolan Fedak, you have Damone King. I mean, this is a team that's just got a plethora of dudes, both in the starting lineup and off the bench, that can make plays. So I want to stick with them.
Yeah, Westerville North, both of their losses on the road as well. It's Olentangy Orange and St. Ignatius. And I think the biggest difference for them is their transition defense. I mean, we saw them last year against Newark. Newark would keep the ball in the half court for Westerville North. They'd force a miss and they'd quickly turn around in transition. Against Louisville, Westerville North simply did not allow that to happen. They also didn't allow it to happen against Richmond Heights. If they're playing tough transition defense, that just unlocks a whole nother ceiling to their team. We'll move into Division 3, where I took Garfield Heights. I don't think we know too much about Garfield Heights right now. I think the next 2 weeks will say a lot about them. They play Warrensville Heights tonight. This podcast is going to come out on Friday. So we're not sure if they're going to win the battle of Sunny versus Michi, but they got their first big win of the season over Richmond Heights at home. Marcus Johnson was sensational. And if he's healthy, I feel as good as any team in Division 3 with Garfield Heights. I mean, the ability for Johnson to just carry his team offensively. I've seen him do it last year at Flying to the Hoop against the powerhouse from Texas. He did it against Richmond Heights, scoring almost 40 points. I mean, he is a guy who can simply take over games. In Division 3, you're not facing the same quality of competition that you would have last season in Division 1. And while Garfield Heights definitely lost some key seniors from last year, I still think that this team has a chance to finally win that state championship for Sonny Johnson.
It is funny that you mentioned Garfield Heights. I feel like this is probably the latest into the season that I've ever seen Garfield Heights. The fact that I haven't gotten to see them yet in person is pretty rare. They're a team I usually see as much, if not more, than probably anybody else. The team I went with though in Division 3, I'm not worried about these guys. I am only worried from just a health standpoint. I went with Louisville. They started off 4-0. But they've lost 4 of their last 5. They had a tough trip down to Florida, I believe, where they lost a few games down there. And unfortunately for Louisville, man, it doesn't get easier in the month of January as they take on St. Ed's, Richmond Heights, Kettering Altar, and Amani Christian this coming Sunday. Braden Gross, I know, has been dealing with a few different injuries. His back has been bothering him. He had some ankle stuff going on in the summer. I think Louisville goes as far as Braden Gross's health goes. Obviously, they have a number of other guys, but he's a dude that they need to be healthy in order to make a run. So I'll be curious, to see how they respond. After that Florida trip, Amani Christian, who I saw a few times last year, just super tough, gritty squad. They have a few good guards, few football guys. So it should be a good test for them on a neutral floor at John Carroll.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they did go out west to California because they played a couple teams from like Washington. So
Mm,
that would make a
yeah,
little more sense.
I think you're right.
Moving to Division 4, I took Kettering Altar, and it's hard to trust what you're going to get from this team in December and January. Like back-to-back seasons, they just have some puzzling losses, not only to the teams that they've lost to, but the margins that they've lost to. But last year they flipped a switch come playoff time, and they certainly have the talent to flip a switch again this season. I mean, this team is loaded with talent. They got shooters, they got size, they got depth. Like, there's no reason for this team to lose more than 2 games the rest of the season. I mean, that's just how much talent Kettering Altar has. There's not a ton of competition in Division 4 from Southwest Ohio besides Cincinnati, Wyoming. So they will likely have a pretty easy path to at least the regional final. I mean, I still think they're probably the team to beat in Division 4, but they sometimes have these weird moments in the regular season.
Yeah, and we've seen it, like you mentioned last year. We've seen it again so far this year. To their defense, though, half of their losses have come to, out-of-state teams. I think that flying to the hoop game against Louisville, with it being about midway through the month, I always look at flying to the hoop as about like the halfway mark of the season. And I think teams should really start to be clicking and rolling by, late January. So I'll be curious to see how they do in that game. Last year they had a phenomenal game. God, what was that team they played out of Florida where they were
Westminster Academy.
yeah, when they played Westminster, they were down huge, came back, had a chance to win it at the buzzer.
That was one of
Uh,
the 5 best games I watched all of last season. I mean, shot for shot, their seniors played well. RJ Greer played well. Brady Connor stepped up. Like, that was a big, big time game by Kettering Altar.
Absolutely. And I'm not worried as much about this pick. Like I said, I will be curious to see how they do the second half of the season. But Not a lot of good basketball being played in November or December by many people. So try not to put too much stock into those early losses. But like you mentioned, some of the margins were definitely a little kind of eye catching.
We disagreed in Division Five. I went with Richmond Heights. It's been an interesting start to their season, taking some tough losses. Dorian Jones is sick, so hopefully he'll be able to return pretty soon to the court. I mean, not they're a completely different team without Dorian Jones this year. They lack the size, they lack the defensive pop that Dorian brings, and his ability to turn you over, make shots from the outside. It supremely changes the ceiling of this team. But I think once he gets back to 100%, I'm going to go down swinging with the trio of Dorian Jones, Derek Barber, and Damaris Winters. They're trying to become the first team in OHSAA history to win 4 state titles in a row, and I'm not picking against them. So they're going to have to lose. It's not the greatest start of the season, but they played pretty much nothing but tough opponents. I mean, they're consistently challenging themselves against some of the best teams in the state, and they're going to be ready come playoff time. It's just going to be whether any team can beat them up on the inside and force them to take bad shots from the perimeter. That's how you're going to beat them in the playoffs. So can anybody do that? We'll find out.
Yeah, and shout out to Coach Rogers, man. It seems like he's always just putting his team through the gauntlet, just with a variety of showcases, out of state teams. They don't duck any smoke over there at Richmond Heights. So I always got to give credit to that. You went with the experience, but I'm going with the youth of the Lou, baby. Give me Luther and East. They're currently sitting at 7-1. Their only loss came to Warrensville Heights. Man, and they're far and away the youngest team on my list. So I expect some dips and some highs throughout the season, but I think it's just a matter of time before this team hits a stride. They're just way too deep. Ton of just young sophomores, a couple juniors. I think Luther needs a team that's going to figure it out. And we might actually, see a preview of the regional final here next week with Luther and East taking on Richmond Heights down in Columbus at the Ohio Play-by-Play Classic at Ohio Dominican. Definitely a weird place for these two teams to play. I mean, it's on a neutral floor, but I don't know. I think it is kind of silly that we got two Cleveland teams driving 2 hours to play each other at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, but it should be a phenomenal game nonetheless. I'll probably end up making the trip just because I'm curious to see how these guys do. I expect this one to get a little chippy too, man. So yeah, it should be a really
Absolutely, especially after last year. I mean, Lutheran East took that game so personally. I was confident that they were going to get it done last year, and they did. So we'll see if Richmond Heights got payback on their mind. And moving to Division Six, I went with Spencerville. I mean, they're taking care of business right now, undefeated, doing whatever I expected them to do this year as my preseason pick. What I will say is Northwest Ohio is stacked in Division Six, and some of the other teams I expected to be good in Northwest Ohio have also had impressive starts to the season. I think it's going to be a gauntlet, but I think Spencerville is the best team in Division Six, so I'll keep rolling with them, even though their path looks much tougher than the team you picked.
You know who else is taking care of business, baby? The Hawks at Berlin Highland, 7-0 right now. And they're absolutely cruising, man. I got to take a look at their schedule earlier today. They haven't had a single game this year that's been in the single digits. Their average margin of victory is like nearly 21 points right now.
And they're not
Uh,
facing scrubs. They are playing some tough teams that they are dismantling right now.
Yeah, so shout out to Berlin Highland, man. As I've said it before, I'll say it again. Death, taxes, Berlin Highland in the Final Four. So I'm sticking with the Hawks, and I feel just as confident with that pick as almost any of my other picks outside of this next one we're going to talk about.
Wow, you feel this confident about Division Seven? I went with Rushi. They've had an excellent start to their season. I mean, they've faced a ton of challenges in conference play, nearby non-conference opponents. I mean, they're beating everybody and they're doing it pretty emphatically. I've been so impressed with Rushi, but you know who else is doing the same thing? Delphos St. John. So I think that could be a clash of the Titans. I'll be curious to see how the regions line up if those teams would meet in the championship game or in the final four, because I think if those teams are able to meet at UD Arena in the Division 7 state title, I think that would be big time atmosphere. I think these are clearly the two best teams in Division 7. So we'll see which team is still playing the best basketball come March, because I would be stunned if either of these teams take early playoff losses.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm probably the most confident in Rushi as I am with any of these other picks. 9-0, just absolutely dominating, like you mentioned. And they've yet to give up 50 points in a game this year, which I find to be pretty remarkable. I just think they have a lot of depth, size, experience, and this is a team that's just been, it's their year. I think it's time. They've been knocking on the door. Unfortunately, Richmond Heights was there to answer these last couple of years, but I think Rushi is just it's their year. I think they take care of business and get it done. That would be a phenomenal game, and I think the crowd for that game, regardless of where it's played, I think would be big time. And that's a game that I would definitely wipe the calendar for. And if I could get to it, I absolutely will. So let's see.
Yeah, that would be a game you would be hard pressed to miss no matter where it's played. But we'll move on to our December recap. TJ, why don't you get us started talking about your favorite game of the month?
It's funny, man. My favorite game of the month actually just happened this past weekend down at the Holiday Hoopla. It was kind of a bit of a slow start to the weekend at the event, but I thought it got better. And Sunday was a really good day of basketball. I thought five of the six games were really competitive. But Delaware Hayes and Brunswick was just a ton of fun. I thought it was entertaining from start to finish. A lot of offense. The star players stepped up with Trey Drexler and Landon Vanderwalker, both eclipsing the 25-point mark. And I thought a lot of the role guys stepped up too. Got to see some new faces for a couple kids. I thought Brunswick had a few sneaky guys. Senior Matt Morgan, sophomore Aiden Evert, and then Delaware Hayes, Jeremiah Russell, Chase Griggs, I thought was really, really good. So it was just, to me, it was a well-rounded game. Two of the better coach teams in the state. Phenomenal basketball. Definitely my favorite game, I think, from start to finish this year.
Yeah, that was a big time game. Both teams going back and forth, a lot of scoring, a lot of impressive shot making. I was only at the Holiday Hoopla on Sunday, and like you mentioned, great day of basketball, some fantastic games, and some really talented teams that we expect to be watching and hearing about more as the season moves on. My game of the month also happened over Christmas break, and that was Warrensville Heights versus Lutheran East. Honestly, coming into the game, I didn't know much about Warrensville. I only watched them once last season in a tough playoff loss. They had a couple seniors that graduated, but they've just got a bunch of guys that can help you win. Like Noah Chambers is a point guard who can make shots. He's also gotten tougher as he's gotten older, making more defensive plays. Tabian Anderson, he's a senior guard who makes hustle plays, fights for loose balls. Cam Hill leads a strong junior class as like a wing guard who can knock down open shots, uses length defensively, score in transition. And it was fun to see the young Lutheran East squad go through some growing pains. I mean, like you mentioned, they have no seniors on the roster. TJ Crumble and Dylan Ziegler had some big moments in that game. And a couple of their sophomores got thrown right into the fire in basically a sold out environment, crowd going crazy, a lot of yelling, a lot of momentum shifts back and forth. It was a fun game to watch both those teams kind of figure it out and get up until this point, probably the biggest win of Michi Johnson's career as a head coach at Warrensville Heights. He seems like he's building a program that could be a perennial contender in Northeast Ohio after they had a couple down years, but they were a powerhouse in the early 2010s as well. So definitely talent to be had at Warrensville Heights, and it seems like he's getting the most out of it. They're a team that really surprised me and are going to be a contender in Division 4 this season. So we'll move on to our favorite moment of the month. TJ, I'll let you get started with your favorite moment of the month of December.
Yeah, so I'm going back to the holiday hoopla. I'm not like a huge fan of game MVPs, right? Especially to like losing teams. I hate that that's become such like a norm in Ohio. If we're going to do game MVPs, can we just give it to somebody from the winning team and just call it a day? But when Wayne knocked off Dublin Kaufman, Caden Post, who's a junior for Wayne, had a career high 21 points, knocked down 5 threes. Uh, was kind of a breakout game for him. He got awarded the game MVP, but it was just the fact that how happy his teammates were for him, how happy Coach Martindale was for him. It was a refreshing moment just to see the culture that Coach has going on over there at Wayne. It was kind of a bit of a joyous moment, man. Like everyone was just celebrating him. You'd have thought the kid just hit the Mega Millions or something. But yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite moments. I'm not sure why it stuck out to me as much as it did, but it was just I think in a culture where individuality is so celebrated and we're focusing on sometimes the wrong things. It was cool to see a team just be a team for once.
Yeah, shout out Coach Martindale. I mean, it seems like the Wayne kids always like each other, and they usually get more out of the sum of their parts, just in terms of gritty wins, toughness, and always a fun team to watch. So shout out Hebrides Wayne. For my favorite moment of the month, I'm going to go back to Garfield Heights. And honestly, it was watching King Young cook for Cleveland Central Catholic against his old school Maple Heights. I mean, it was such a fun environment. Both teams have kids that transferred from one school to the other. King Young and I think another starter for Cleveland Central Catholic were both at Maple Heights. Then they went over to Cleveland Central Catholic. And then two kids for Maple Heights came over from Cleveland Central Catholic. There were like transfers going every which way. But when King Young hit the dagger three-pointer to end the third quarter at the buzzer and he turned to the crowd, I mean, the place was going nuts. It was just a fun environment. And it had a lot of emotions on both sides. And that's what brings out the best in high school basketball. There's so many games where I feel like it just doesn't even matter who wins or loses. Like you're playing 22 games. Sometimes these games are just, yeah, it's 1 on 22 on the schedule. But this one meant a lot to both sides, both coaching staffs. The environment was great. That was probably my favorite moment of the month of December. So shout out King Young, shout out Cleveland Central Catholic for the victory. And we are going to move into our storyline of the month. We teased it a little bit earlier, but TJ, what is your storyline of December?
I feel like Division One guys is about as wide open as it has been in the last 3 or 4 years. I feel like prior to the last couple of seasons, we've all kind of had an idea, which teams could win it, which teams were the favorites. I have no clue right now, and I think that's actually really cool, really fun to say. But I mean, you look at Central Ohio, especially with Reynoldsburg, Olentangy Orange, Olentangy Liberty, Delaware Hayes. You have Massillon Jackson, Brunswick, Cleveland St. Ignatius, Centerville, Cincinnati Moeller. I mean, the list goes on of teams that I feel like have the talent and the coaching to win a region come March. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch it unfold. I'm actually glad we get to see some of these matchups this month, actually, with Ignatius being involved in a few of them. They take on Olentangy Orange this coming Sunday, and then I believe they play Moeller at Flying to the Hoop. It's actually nice to see Moeller back at Flying to the Hoop. I don't know in the last 10 years that I've been covering, I don't know if I've ever seen Moeller flying to the hoop before. Not that I can remember, at least. So it's cool that they're actually playing in the event and then playing against another, top five or so team in the respective division.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, the past couple years, you could just pencil in Pickerington Central, Centerville. I mean, St. Ignatius recently. You can almost pencil them into the Final Four. And this year, there really aren't any teams that I feel as confident as I did those groups in the past to just make it to the Final Four. I went sort of the other way. I think we're seeing clear teams separating in the smaller divisions, divisions 5 through 7. We mentioned Russia, Delphos St. John, Spencerville, Berlin Highland, Lutheran East, even like a Margaretta. I mean, we're seeing teams in these smaller divisions just flat out separate themselves from the crowd. and it's going to make some potentially very exciting playoff games down the line. But unfortunately, it seems like these teams are playing so well right now. Maybe they're going to have some comfortable victories until they reach a clash of the Titans in maybe a regional final or a Final Four game for some of these smaller division teams. So I think it's starting to become really clear who the teams that can win a state title in the smaller divisions are, compared to the teams that are just going to be competing for district titles. And with that being said, we are going to move on to our biggest surprise teams, moments, games of the month of December. TJ, I'll let you start it off with your biggest surprises of December.
Just to kind of go back to what you were elaborating on with some of those small teams, kind of clearly separating themselves into smaller divisions. Isn't that what the seven divisions were supposed to prevent, right? It was supposed to add more parity, be better games, and then we're just going to see the same teams down there. It's just going to be more of those same teams. So I don't know, man. I just find that really funny that it's going to have the exact opposite result of what it was intended to.
Yeah,
But
Rushi's still going to crush everybody in Southwest Ohio, probably.
yeah, some of my biggest surprises, I don't know why this is a surprise to me. And I apologize in advance to Coach TK Griffith over at Archbishop Hoban. But the Knights are 6-0. They got big wins over Massillon Jackson and Lutheran West, two teams that I think are both top 10 in their respective divisions. Senior Kenny Scott, man, a kid who started his career off at Glen Oak, has been with Hoban now for the last 2 seasons. He's been the catalyst. You want to talk about a guy that's just setting the table, unselfishly getting everybody involved. I mean, the kid is like a walking paint touch right now. And he's made everyone else around him better, including sophomore John Johnson, who we've seen, take a big step up. He's shooting the ball at a really high level. Sam Greer, right, who everybody should be familiar with from the state championship game a couple years ago. He's a junior now. And then you have senior Cameron Ensley, who adds a little bit of high-low versatility, right? Two big bodies that can just kind of both play a little inside it out. Good hands, good touch around the rim. You mentioned it earlier, but Warrensville Heights knocking off Lutheran East. I talked to that staff a little bit before the game, and those guys were confident, man. They told me before the game, they said, "Hey, T, if we can score, we're going to beat these guys." And sure enough, that's what they did. I think he just has a variety of dudes that can help you win games, like you mentioned. Juniors Cam Hill, CJ Williams, Jalen Gum off the bench. Seniors Noah Chambers, Tavian Anderson, Wayne Chappelle. I think they all had their moments throughout that game. I think you'd be a hard pressed to find a tougher, more gritty team than Warrensville Heights right now. And the only loss they've had so far this year is coming to St. Ignatius on opening night. Shout out to Warrensville. Shout out to Goggle Meach. I think they've kind of adopted his personality. And keep your eyes open, man. They got a lot of young talent. They have a really intriguing freshman who I think we're going to get to know really well here in the next coming years in Quaylen Howard. So, and then my last surprise, right? And this is no knock to Lima Shawnee, right? They're probably preseason top 10. But then beating Bishop Hartley in Columbus on a neutral floor after being down pretty big early on in a game that felt like Bishop Hartley was just going to run away with, right, in the first quarter and a half. And then the Berkey brothers did what Berkey brothers do, man. They combined for almost 50 points. I didn't think they looked rattled at any point throughout the year. I think throughout the game, I think Beckett Berkey has been phenomenal. He had 30 points that night, really shooting the ball. His confidence is through the roof. His younger brother, Trevick, who is one of the more intriguing kids in all of Northwest Ohio, he's been good as well, and they've had moments. Their only loss this year has been to Lima Central Catholic. And then conveniently enough, they got to play Lima Central Catholic again this past weekend, and they took it to them. They won 74-59. So they got a little bit of a revenge tour going there. But yeah, shout out to Lima Shawnee.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly whiffed not having Akron, Hoban, and Warrensville Heights in my preseason top 10 for Divisions 3 and Division 4. Sorry to those groups. Should have had you in there. I didn't. That's on me. But they're winning games, and I updated my rankings near the end of December, and they were both added into the top 5. So that's they're handling their business, making impressive statement wins For my two biggest surprises, I first went with Canfield. This was sort of a Stubbs preseason favorite. He was surprised I didn't have Canfield in the top 10 for Division Four. I should have had him in the top 10 in the preseason. They already hold wins over Cheney, Ursuline, East Liverpool, and Cardinal Mooney. And they have Boardman, Warren G. Harding, and Warren JFK on the schedule in January. If they win those three games, they will have defeated basically every notable Youngstown area team this season, which would be a remarkable achievement if Canfield can get that done. And then the other biggest surprise team, I went with CHCA. They got wins over Tri Village, Purcell Marion, and Highlands out of Northern Kentucky. They got a big rivalry game against Corey Albertson's bunch Summit Country Day on Friday. And their only loss is to Cincinnati St. Xavier by 1 point. They're one of the top Division One teams in Southwest Ohio. Senior Luke Sanders is one of the top unsigned seniors in Ohio. He can just flat out score the basketball, has been productive at the varsity level for a few years now, taking his game to new levels as a shot maker, slasher, improving as an athlete. He's a kid who I expect to continue to get scholarship attention if he continues to play how he has this season. So shout out CHCA. They're definitely a team that is on the rise in Division Four in Southwest Ohio. And maybe they'll be able to crash the party with Kettering Alter and Cincinnati, Wyoming, and maybe knock one of those teams off in the playoffs. Now, instead of team of the week and player of the week, we're going to do team of the month and player of the month. TJ, who is your team of the month?
My team of the month is somebody that I mentioned at the end of last season. Mentioned a little bit in I think episode 1 or 2 of this year. But I'm going with Strongsville. Coach Perry and company are currently 6-0. They have wins over Nordonia, Medina, and Chaminade Julian. I think they got to be the favorite right now to win the GCC. I think there's a couple teams that can make a case for that. But I just think Strongsville is rolling right now. This group just plays together. They play hard. And senior Josh Byers could very well be one of the more underrated and underappreciated kids in the whole area. So I'll be curious to see how that GCC race shapes up. But I think it's pretty tough to go against Strongsville at the moment. And this is a team, mind you, that we spend a lot of our episodes talking about the Lutheran East, the Ignatiuses of the world that have 6, 7, 8 college guys, across all 4 grades. But Strongsville is not a team that one goes very deep and two has like just a ton of guys that'll be playing at the next level. And they just seem to win a lot more than they probably should. And this year is really no different. So for those reasons, Strongsville is going to be my team of the month.
My team of the month is Defiance. They are currently 8-0 with their marquee victory coming over Toledo St. Francis. Last week, they won on a buzzer beater at Ottawa Glandorf, and they still have games against Lima Central Catholic and Lima Shawnee in January. We're going to see how real this 8-0 start is, but shout out to Defiance. I definitely did not expect to be saying they would be undefeated heading into 2025. They're looking like they could be one of the best teams in Northwest Ohio Division III. So we'll see what they're able to do in the playoffs, but a great start to the year for Defiance. And then we'll roll into my player of the month. And I went with Andrew Horner from Miamisburg. He currently leads the GWAC in scoring and rebounding at 24.4 points per game and 11.6 rebounds per game. He actually achieved that as a junior as well, but is scoring 3 more points per game and grabbing 2 more rebounds per game than he did last year. So even padding to the lead that he had on the rest of the conference. He's also second in the conference with 1.9 blocks per game. That's a huge uptick from last season. Miamisburg is 4-0 in GWAC play. Every other team in the conference has at least 2 league losses. So they've sort of got a nice grip on the early conference slate. Shout out Andrew Horner, one of the most productive bigs in Ohio. He can just flat out score the basketball, shoot the ball from the outside, post up, move without the ball, finish at the rim, an extremely skilled player. And I think he's going to have a really solid college career. TJ, who is your player of the month?
You mentioned, figuring out whether or not that 8-0 start from Defiance was real or not. One 8-0 start I think we know is real, is Reynoldsburg. I mean, they played a gauntlet so far, right? They got wins over Whitmer, Trotwood, Madison, St. Ignatius, Cincinnati, Princeton, a bunch of big games coming up this month. But I think some of the early success can be attributed to just the jump that Xavier McKinney has made. It seems that like he just gets better on like a weekly basis, and he's really emerged on both sides of the ball. I think he's like oozing with confidence right now. He's shooting the ball more consistently from the perimeter. And I think his versatility as an on-off ball guard that can slide over and create or play off the ball with his shooting, I think that's been a major, major difference for Reynoldsburg so far. And I think even though he's a junior, right, we're talking about probably the most talented team in Ohio on paper. I think Xavier McKinney has emerged as quite possibly their most valuable and most important player. And I'll be curious to see, what he does when the lights are the brightest.
Yeah, Xavier currently committed to my alma mater, Ohio University. We'll see if he can be the difference for a Reynoldsburg team that has come up short in the playoffs the past few seasons. We'll see if they can break through in March. And we just finished looking back at all the biggest topics in the month of December and recapping what we've seen. Now it's time to look forward. TJ, this Sunday, the Cleveland Play-by-Play Classic. We've teased it. Why don't you give us a rundown of all the gigantic matchups that we're going to be watching for at John Carroll University this Sunday?
So the Cleveland Play-by-Play Classic is honestly one of my favorite days throughout the whole season, and it's been this way for quite a while. I would say the Cleveland Play-by-Play, and then probably the Columbus Division One District Finals. Those are 2 days that I feel like I find myself looking forward to more than any other. But this is probably the best 1 day showcase I think that we have throughout the state. Going down this Sunday at John Carroll. We got 7 games, so I mean it makes for a long day for people like me and Roth who are there for the duration of the event. But we got Cleveland Central Catholic against Hawking to tip off the day. Sophomore King Young, who Roth mentioned earlier in the show, gets to go against another talented young guard in Ice Taylor. Hawkins also got a duo of guards with Gregory Price and Deron Hill. Glenville and Lutheran West, that should be a really fun up-tempo game. I think Lutheran West is playing perhaps some of their best basketball right now. They've played in back-to-back showcases over the holiday break, and they've dominated. I think Ryan Kalo, who very well could have been my player of the month, he's been phenomenal. Definitely another stock riser in Northeast Ohio. St. B and Brunswick, right? We got a St. B team that's been a little up and down, right? You don't know what you're going to get. They beat Ursuline. They lose a couple games. I believe they're like 5-4 right now. And they're going against a Brunswick team that's just really fun to watch, led by junior guard Trey Drexler. Um, then perhaps the best game of the day would be Olentangy Orange and St. Ignatius, two top 5 teams in Division One. I think this is going to be I don't think there's any bad blood between these two teams, but I think you're going to see these two teams really have a point to prove. And I think Coach Kalo is going to have a point to prove too, man. That's our guy, friend of the show, but I don't think he's driving 2 hours up to John Carroll to lose a game. And I don't think Cam Joyce is going to want to lose that one either. So I think that's going to be really fun. You got seniors, Devin Brown committed to Davidson, Damon Fryery going to Dayton, Quinn Wilkie going to Kent State, plethora of other, kind of dual sport guys on both sides.
When we
Luther,
interviewed Cam Joyce, he quickly knew who the two teams that were ahead of St. Ignatius in my preseason Division One rankings were, and one of them was Olentangy Orange. So
oh yeah,
he
this game is
knows.
circled, and honestly, man, I wouldn't be shocked if both teams asked for this game. I think that they're two of the more competitive coaches, right, that we have. I think Cam is more of a quiet, confident guy, where Kalo is one of the more passionate, fiery dudes you're going to see on the sideline, man. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Both friends of the show, two guys that we have a lot of respect for over here at Drive to Dayton. Then you have Lutheran East and Garfield Heights. I think by the time that game kicks off, I think that place is going to be packed. And as it should be, right? We get our first look this season at Marcus Johnson. He'll be going against his close friend, TJ Crumble. Then you have freshman Dylan Ziegler, and a plethora of other guys for Lutheran East. Richmond Heights and Reynoldsburg, right? Richmond Heights, who we mentioned, who has had a bit of an up and down start to the year. They've been without Dorian Jones the last couple games. Hopefully he's back and healthy. And they're going against a Reynoldsburg team that's really clicking right now. So it'll be curious to see, how they bounce back in that one. And then lastly, we have Louisville against Alumni Christian. Louisville, like we mentioned, coming off a bit of a gauntlet down in California. They played some really big schools, really talented teams. And then they get to turn around and play a scrappy Western PA team in Alumni Christian. So, and then lastly, another event I want to mention, it often gets overlooked because of flying to the hoop. Flying to the hoop, has been going on for 20 years now, it seems like. One of the better events, not only in Ohio, but across the Midwest. But the battle in the 614 going down at Ohio Dominican, it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday. They do a good job of getting a bunch of like off the path teams mixed in with a bunch of, the upper class top tier teams. A few games that really stood out to me that I'm going to kind of regret not seeing. Lutheran West and Harvest Prep, I just think that's a lot of fun just from a tempo pace standpoint. Massillon Jackson and Westerville North. I think Massillon Jackson going to look to bounce back. They've had a couple losses early in the season. Then you got Toledo St. Francis against Olentangy Liberty. So you get to see Alan Horton Jr. at Toledo St. Francis against senior Tyler Kropp, who's committed to Northwestern. Two of the better coach teams in their respective regions. And then, man, Wyoming and Bishop Hartley. You want to talk about a fun game, good guards, up tempo. That should be a blast. So those, I think, are the four probably headliner games of that event. So if you don't feel like driving down to Dayton, if the weather gets maybe a little too shaky for you, you got a good one in your backyard at the Battle of the 614.
Absolutely. Some big time games there. And then this Saturday, I think we're both planning on going to the New Year's Bash at Harvest Prep. Maumee Valley Country Day takes on Mansfield Senior. That has a bunch of talented underclassmen and Ty Lewis, Kalen Brooks, and Jabraham Price. Then we get to see undefeated Chesapeake. They're one of 6 undefeated teams right now in Southeast Ohio. They're going up against Franklin Monroe. Westland takes on Dublin Kaufman. It'll be my first chance to see Dublin Kaufman this season. Excited to see Thomas Cochran and, of course, senior Colin McClure. And the day wraps up with the host Harvest Prep taking on Cincinnati Woodward, always one of the most athletic teams out of the Cincinnati Metro Athletic Conference. And then we will have a full preview of Flying to the Hoop with the week leading up to the event. But just want to mention it as things to look forward to in the month of January. And another thing I'm looking forward to, rivalry games starting to heat up. I mean, you got Eds versus Ignatius on Friday, Garfield versus Warrensville Heights tonight. The Toledo Catholic League is going to have all their rivalry games. Federal League, the GCL South play opens up in the month of January. OCC rivalries are heating up. So I think that's something that is all fans should look forward to. Packed gyms, rivalry games in the month of January. And then finally, it's always excited in the new year when you get a battle of unbeatens. Tomorrow we got 2 games where that fits. Pickerington North takes on Bishop Watterson in Columbus. Watterson had a late start after winning the football state championship, but they're 4-0. Pickerington North, led by Arness Lawson, they've had a great start to the season. And the emergence of J.R. Bates has been a major talking point for the Panthers. They knocked off St. Ed's at the Holiday Hoopla event. And down in Southeast Ohio, man, right along the Ohio River, Meigs takes on Marietta. Both teams are undefeated. This should be a really fun one. I'm really curious to see who gets it done. So I'll try and keep an eye out for potential unbeaten games as we move forward because they're going to become rarer and rarer as teams continue to take their first losses of the season. Like I mentioned, 6 teams in Southeast Ohio currently unbeaten. But with Meigs and Marietta playing each other, that number is at least going to be down to 5 after Friday night.
Which brings us to our next segment, which is one of my favorites in the buy or sell. So the last couple of days, I've been seeing a lot of talk online about the Max Preps RPI formula. A lot of people are just starting to understand that when you play an out-of-state team, regardless of how big or small that school is, it counts as a Division IV school in terms of your RPI formula. So a lot of people were saying that, hey, maybe we should, stop playing out-of-state teams, stop going on some of these trips or playing in some of these showcases. So buy or sell, Roth. Teams should play less out-of-state teams due to the impact on the Max Preps RPI formula.
So I am selling this take. And the reason why is we saw last year, even teams that had poor records due to playing extremely tough schedules and were clearly underseeded, those teams still got respect once you picked your name on the bracket, even though you were maybe the 16th team in a division to pick your spot on the bracket. If the other coaches think you're one of the top five teams, they're going to do their best to avoid you. We saw this in Cincinnati. We saw this in Northeast Ohio. The coaches still understand if you're a really talented team and you took some tough losses, they're going to be like, I don't want to be stuck with those guys. Let's go somewhere else. So I'm going to sell. It is going to affect your RPI ranking and where you pick on the bracket unfairly. But I think that during the selection Sunday, where all the coaches pick where they're going to go on the brackets, I think that those teams get the same amount of respect as if they were just poorly voted on by the coaches, how we used to do it, which also seems kind of silly in the past as well.
Exactly. I mean, I've been getting texts and phone calls already about, teams trying to figure out which regions they should go into, which teams they should avoid. These coaches know who's good and who's not good. That number next to the name of your school doesn't mean as much when guys have done their homework and watched the film. So I'm also selling. Yeah, would playing more, in-state teams, right? Would it improve your seating? Yes, obviously. But I think teams should continue to challenge themselves, play the best schedule possible. But more importantly, man, let's not forget the big picture. Like in 15 years, your kids aren't going to remember what seed they were or what if their RPI formula was a 794 or a 763. They're not going to remember that. But in 15 years, you know what they are going to remember? They're going to remember that out of state trip to Florida or to Myrtle Beach or to California where they got to hang out with their buddies, pull pranks on each other, pour water on each other when somebody fell asleep first, right? Like let's let these kids be kids. Let's let them enjoy it. Coaches continue to schedule these trips, focus on team bonding, building relationships, building camaraderie, and more importantly, just having fun. Let's not get too caught up in the analytics and stuff, man.
And it
Please.
doesn't matter if you game the system, you're eventually going to have to beat good teams if you want to win a regional title. It doesn't matter if you have the greatest computer numbers ever. If you're going to win a regional title, you're going to have to beat some good teams. So maybe you get one easier game at the start. It's going to come back to you eventually. So the best teams are going to win. Which brings us to our second question. TJ, I'll let you introduce that one as well.
So this was a good question. We meant to talk about it a couple of weeks ago, but obviously we took some time with the holidays and just me and Ralph were struggling to get our schedules aligned. Just busy with games and family stuff. But this is a question I've been thinking on for the last couple of days. Is Mr. Basketball will be won by a junior this year? And prior to the season, I don't know how I would have answered this, but I do know how I'm going to answer it right now. I'm buying. Um, I think Marcus Johnson last year as a sophomore had a strong case. He probably would have been third in my voting, honestly. And I think the fact that, his name was already in the mix a year ago, he's having a monster start to the season, right? He's committed to Ohio State. And it's not as far-fetched as people might think for a junior to win this award. I mean, just 3 years ago, we saw Gabe Cupps win it at Centerville as a junior. I think Arness Lawson at Pick North, right? I think he's also another name worth mentioning. They're undefeated. He could possibly be the best senior in Ohio. And it seems like we get a lot of Central Ohio winners in the last, 10, 15 years or so. So that wouldn't shock me either. But this is another one I think is wide open. I don't think we have a clear answer. Whereas last year it felt like, it was going to come down to Jesse McCullough or Colin White with, Marcus Johnson on the outside looking in. I think Marcus might be, leading that race right now.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention besides Marcus and also Arnaz Lawson, but you got guys like Antoine West having big seasons, Trey Perry, and then you also got Turtle Kwasniak putting up video game numbers for Cornerstone Christian. TJ Crumble is having a big season. Dorian Jones is a name that we have to consider. Senior committed to Ohio State, three-time state champion. I mean, outside looking in from the junior class, look at what Julian Washington is doing for Margaretta. He could be a finalist. Probably too early for him to win the award, but I could see him being named a finalist as a junior as well. So a handful of names to be fighting for Mr. Basketball. It'll be interesting to see how the narrative shifts around that award as we move into the later months of February and March. Our next buy or sell, both Reynoldsburg and Olentangy Orange will make the final four by going to separate regions.
I'm going to sell. I think both teams right now, through a month or so of the season, are probably both pretty clearly number one and number two in Division One. I think there are a few teams you can make a case for, right? Ignatius, Moeller, but those are probably the two teams I think are playing the best basketball right now. Um, I don't know. I just don't think things go as we expect, come March. Um, so yeah, I don't know. And like, do I want to go to Southwest Ohio? I mean, Southwest Ohio has, to me, as much depth as Central Ohio, if not pretty stinking close, with, the Fairfields, the St. X, the Centervilles, the Molars. I don't think I'm in a rush to just go play any of those guys either. Where I think in Columbus, if you're those two teams, you have a little bit more fear, right? Teams respect you, teams are more familiar with you, which could work both in your favor or against you. So I don't know. It's a tricky question, and I'd be curious if these two teams want to play each other, right? Like if you're only Tangy Orange, right, you got to feel pretty confident about how that went last year. But I think Reynoldsburg is kind of pretty pissed off at the result of last year, and I think that's a game they probably want. So I don't know. I don't know if these two teams are going to want to go away from each other, or if they just want to meet head to head and try to make it happen again. I don't know.
I think it's so fascinating who picks where first. Like, if Olentangy Orange is the one seed, are they like, we're staying in Columbus, we're going to stay there? Or if Reynoldsburg is the one seed and they're just like, you know what, we'll go down to Southwest Ohio. Or if Reynoldsburg is the one seed, they pass and let Olentangy Orange decide what region they go to. And then Reynoldsburg decides, do we want to join them or do we want to avoid them? I think there's so many interesting factors with the selection of the regions. But I think these coaches, I think they kind of think they might have, and I also think they want to have that Columbus pride. I bet you they would be like, it'd be cool if we both made it. Wouldn't it be pretty cool? So I kind of think they might go away from each other and try to show, yeah, we'll go away from each other and we'll still play in the final four of the state title game because that's how good we think our two teams are. So it'll be interesting, but that moves us on to our final question, also state championship related. Buy or sell? Division three is a harder state championship to win compared to Division two.
I'm buying. When all the divisions first got announced a few months ago, I had a lot of text messages and calls from coaches who were kind of pissed that they ended up in Division Three. They actually wanted to be Division Two for that exact reason. I just think there's more depth. I think both from a team and individual talent standpoint in Division Three. I mean, you got your Garfield Heights, Louisville, Lutheran West, Toledo Central Catholic, Bishop Hartley, Lima Shawnee, Aiken. Akron, St. Vincent, St. Mary, right? All teams that you don't want to play at any point throughout the postseason. I just think there's a little more depth, a little more talent just in terms of guys that can just win a game, like a Marcus Johnson, like the Berkey brothers, like the Callaway brothers, like the trio of guys at Louisville. I think Division Three just has a little more depth to it in terms of teams I think that can make a run.
I agree. And I feel like we really never said this in the four division format. Like, oh, Division three is harder than Division two, or oh, Division two is harder than Division one. But I think it's pretty clear in the seven division format, the way they have it, with only 64 teams in Division Two, and some of those 64 teams not being very strong. Yeah, Division Two is a pretty comfortable place to be if you are one of the 5 to 10 teams that are really trying to win a state title in Division Two. So
And I think it goes back to I think we had some of this conversation last year on the show with Stubbs, but the OHSAA was under the impression that the lack of parity that we were seeing in the state tournament was an enrollment issue. It's never been an enrollment issue in Ohio. It's been a who's got the dudes, who doesn't have the dudes, who's closer to the greater cities, right? Who has a bigger pool of talent that they could potentially pull from, whether it be incoming freshmen or transfers, right? It's easier for a school in Cleveland to get a kid to transfer than it is if you're in Dolphus St. John, right? It just is what it is. You have access to more talent when you're in bigger cities. That's all this has ever come down to. It's never been an enrollment standpoint. It's who's got the dudes, who doesn't have the dudes. And I think that's why we're seeing Division Three be as good and as deep as it is.
and we mentioned this last year. I brought this up. I went through the 10 biggest schools in Divisions 2, 3, and 4 last year. And besides Richmond Heights, none of them were that good. So having the 40 extra kids, it gave them no advantages over the other Division 3 schools last year because they didn't have the good basketball players. And then you had teams at the smaller end of Division 2 and Division 3 that competed for state titles because they either developed talent or they got talent to transfer in there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch it all play out. But I actually got the chance to talk to Ohio State commit in Upper Arlington junior Alex Smith for a quick interview earlier this week. So we're going to quickly jump to my interview with Alex and then wrap up the show with our alumni spotlight. All right, we are now joined by Upper Arlington High School basketball player and Ohio State commit Alex Smith. Alex, first question. I mean, talking about that Ohio State commitment, you're obviously in the class of 2026. It's an early commitment for you, doing it before your junior season. What was the biggest reason towards that commitment? Obviously, you got a guy like Jake Diebler who was recruiting you as an assistant and then gets promoted to the head coach. What was the familiarity like with him and the rest of the staff?
Just the family aspect, they were all reaching out after once June 15th hit. And for all the AU games that I had, there was always a staff member there. And so that really hit home and showed me that they were interested in that. They were part of my family, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, you played a lot of big games on the AAU circuit with Midwest Basketball Club. I remember you had a game against Utah Prospects. You and Dean really went at it.
Yeah,
Do you have any one game like in AAU where you played against somebody where like you were going back and forth and it was like your sort of favorite game to compete against somebody nationally?
probably that game, honestly, against Dean. Good team, got a lot of good guys surrounded by him. And I played pretty good the first half, and the second half just kept it going. So we won that game. Actually, I think we lost that game.
Yeah, yeah,
But
they got you guys at the end.
yeah, oh yeah, the buzzer beater. But still, it was fun to compete against those guys because they were really good, and it gave us a tough battle.
And mentioning AAU, I mean, you've been a guy who's been sort of committed to Midwest Basketball Club from the start. What has just been the biggest benefits for you sticking to the one program and how they've sort of supported your journey and how you've helped elevate their program as well?
Yeah, like I said with Ohio State, it's really family around Midwest too, and staying around one AAU program. I don't like to jump around and switch around because you really don't know what you're about to get into with these new AU teams. So when I got to Midwest and I found like a butter spot there, it was that's I really just wanted to keep it that way and stay at that program because obviously it's hard to find a program like Midwest.
Absolutely. And then earlier this year, you played against Tyler Kropp, who's committed to Northwestern. And I actually didn't know this before the game, but Zach Fleer tweeted out it was the first time Big Ten commits had went up against each other in an OCC game since 2016. Caleb Wesson and Nick Ward at Gahanna and Westerville South. What's that sort of rivalry been like? I mean, you guys know each other. Your whole OCC division is loaded with
Yeah.
Olentangy, Liberty, Orange, Hilliard Bradley, Dublin Kaufman. So what was that game like and just playing up against Tyler over the years?
Well, our division has always been loaded, OCC in general, but our specific conference. And so just playing against Tyler and Devin, just played against him, and then some of those other dudes like Ben, who are all getting interest, and some of them like Devin and Tyler are committed. And just playing against those guys, it's really good competition, and gets us to it gets our team better for as we go on in the season. So that's definitely a good part of playing against them, and then just competition one on one. Me and Tyler playing against each other, that was a pretty good game. So
And then, not to look too far ahead, but on January 7th at the Play-by-Play Classic, it's going to be you guys playing, Garfield Heights playing, and Richmond Heights playing. The reason I'm bringing up those three teams, all three of those teams have an Ohio State commit on the roster. Have you talked to either Dorian or Marcus at all? And are you excited to sort of watch them play at the same event as you on January 7th?
yeah, I've talked to both of them, and I'm really excited to see how they play, and yeah.
And then last question, just talking about your Upper Arlington team. I mean, it seems like you guys got a pretty young group that seemed to gel pretty well in July. You've played a tough schedule to open up the season. What are some of the biggest things you're looking to work on for yourself and also with your teammates as they grow towards this year? And also, I mean, you're going to bring a lot of your players back next season as well.
Yeah. So chemistry and trusting each other, that's something I need to get better at, is just trusting my guys around me, because when some of those teams send those doubles, I've been trying to force trying to score the ball, but I just need to trust my teammates. And then team wise, just turnovers, we need to obviously fix that up, because we've been struggling a little bit with some of the teams that trap, which we play on Friday against the Sales, so they trap a lot. So that will really test us.
Yeah, I mean, DeSales has had a great start to their season, undefeated, a big win over Tri Valley early in the season. So, any final remarks before we let you go and get on with your happy holidays?
Nope. Thank you for having me.
All right, perfect. Thanks for joining us. Once again, that's Alex Smith, Upper Arlington high school basketball player and future Ohio State Buckeye. Thanks again for joining the Drive to Dayton podcast. And to wrap up the show, as always, we have our Alumni Spotlight Players of the Week. I'm going to get started in Division One with Quincy Clark, the Westerville Central grad. He's currently at UMass Lowell, and he had a career high 21 points and 6 rebounds for Stonehill, and also scored 11 points on 5 of 6 from the field with 6 assists versus Dartmouth. So shout out Quincy Clark, a guy who has been well traveled in his college career so far, seeing like he's finally finding his footing at UMass Lowell and becoming a valuable Division One guard. TJ, who is your Division One Alumni Spotlight Player of the Week?
I went with a duo of guys, man, and two names that people in Ohio should be really familiar with, especially if you've been down to the state tournament in recent years. But Jonathan Powell, a Centerville grad, and Sincere Harris, an alumni of Akron St. Vincent St. Mary. They both got the start in West Virginia's upset win over number 7 ranked Kansas. Um, Powell scored 11 points, knocked down 3 threes. Sincere Harris did his best attempt to, stuff the stat sheet with 8 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. So pretty cool seeing two Ohio guys very early into their college careers getting a start in such a big game like that and actually being productive and able to contribute. So
Not many people win at Fog Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas. And the fact that West Virginia is able to do that, first year head coach in the Big 12, really impressive stuff. TJ, I'll just let you keep rolling. Why don't you give your small college player of the week?
So I went with a kid who I actually got to see play one time when he was in college or when he was in high school at Groveport Madison. I thought he was a bit sneaky, under the radar kid, didn't get a lot of pub. I know the guys down at 270 Hoops were, always pretty high on him. but a kid who wasn't highly recruited at the small college level. But Dwayne Davis, who, like I said, went to Groveport, is currently at Muskingum. He is leading the OAC right now in points per game, averaging nearly 21 a night, while also being fifth in the conference in rebounding at 7.3. The Muskies are around 500 for their overall record, but they're 3-0 in league play, and they're currently tied at the top with Mount Union.
Man, shout out Muskingum. That's a really impressive stuff from their program. And then for my small college player of the week, I went with Callie Davis, a Columbus Afrocentric grad. He just became Wilberforce's all-time leading scorer last week. He's averaging almost 19 points per game, shooting over 40% from the three-point line. So shout out to Callie Davis. TJ, you got any closing remarks before we wrap up the show?
I do not. Stay safe. Hope you guys enjoyed the holidays. And if you see us out at any of these events or any of these big games, feel free to come up and talk to us, man. One of my favorite things is, being at events or being at a game and, meeting a fan or a friend of the show. I always think that's pretty cool. We don't do this for clicks or views. I mean, we don't get a lot. I mean, we get a couple, like maybe 200, 300 of you crazy guys that watch this. We appreciate every single one of you. So if you guys see us out, say hello. I'm always down to talk basketball. So is Rob. Other than that, man, I hope you guys have a great holiday break, especially those of you who are in education like me. We only got a few days left, so enjoy them while you can.
Sounds good. Happy New Year.